So in order to do the deployment, what we need to do is go back to the Velocity dashboard. So we click on the Velocity link up here in the toolbar. And this is the main dashboard page. And again, in this VMC menu on the right, we're going to select Deploy Velocity. Now on this screen here, we're going to select the machines that we want to deploy to. Now you'll see the machines aren't showing up here in the systems pane yet. And the reason for that is that we haven't selected anything from the domain. Now, you can simply put a tick next to your domain, then all of the machines in the domain will show up on the right hand side. If you have your machines in a specific organizational unit, you can expand the domain and see the organizational units listed out like a tree, and then just put a tick next to that particular OU that you have your machines in. Now for this, I'm just going to select all the machines because I know which two machines these ones are. So let's go ahead and select those. It's this one, which I've actually called Win2K8R2, as for Windows 2008 R2, so that's this machine here. And this machine on the right is simply called Velocity. It's my test machine that I use in my lab. So with these two machines selected, or more, if you want to deploy to more, then we hit the Save Selection button. And on this screen, it'll show you a list of the machines that you've selected. So you can now have a look through and make sure these are definitely all the machines that you wanted to deploy to. And if you wanted to, you can cancel out or edit this list and so on. But I do want to deploy Velocity to these two machines, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the Next button. On this next screen, you can choose alternative configuration policies. Now, I haven't set any alternative configuration policies up for this test for a very good reason, and that is that the default configuration policy is the correct one to use for pretty much every single situation that you could possibly want to deploy to. This is the one that I would recommend you use. So on this screen, just go ahead and hit that Next button again. And finally, you can say, I want to deploy now, immediately, or if you want to, you can choose a particular date and time. So let's say if I wanted to deploy on Friday, and I wanted to deploy after work on a Friday, so we'll say, yeah, 8:30 p.m. on that Friday, and then I could hit Finish, and a job would be created that would wait until that chosen date and time, and it would then go ahead and do the deployment. But waiting for that amount of time would make this demonstration pretty boring. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say do it now and hit Finish. Now, this is a confirmation of the port that the Velocity Management Console will try to communicate on with these EndNode servers. So that's port 13568 by default. And we can give you a list of all of the ports required. In fact, when I do a write-up of this, I will include that just to make it easier for people. But as long as this port is open in the firewall, we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And the deployment job has now been created. And we can monitor that deployment job, again, from the main Velocity dashboard, which is where you get taken back to. And if you scroll down just a touch, you can see the deployment job here running in the job queue. And you can see that its status is in progress. We've got that little spinning wheel of wait. And what it's doing is a network push install to both of these machines, both of these other virtual machines. Now, what you won't see happen is either of these machines reboot following the installation. And that's one of the great new features of Velocity 7, and indeed its sister software for physical machines, Diskkeeper 18. You don't have to reboot to make this software work. There is zero disruption to any live running workloads. You can install and uninstall without causing any kind of disruption whatsoever. But after a couple of minutes, this will change to a different icon, which will show that it's completed. And I'll speed up this part of the video just so you're not, excuse me, just so that you're not sitting there waiting for a couple of minutes watching this wheel just spin. Okay, so the deployment job is now complete. You can see the icon has changed to indicate complete. If there is any kind of issue deploying to any of these machines, then you would see the same icon, but there'd be a small red warning triangle just overlaid over that green circle to indicate that one or more of the machines that you were trying to deploy to failed. And if that's the case, you can actually click on the job name or select actions from the pull down menu and select view job details. They both take you to the same place. And in here, you can see, well, in this case, both machines were successfully deployed to, but let's say one of them wasn't successful and it had only successfully deployed to one of the machines. The one that failed would be listed down here. So you'd be able to see which machine's deployment failed, and then there would be a little reason or error message to describe why the deployment couldn't complete. And usually it's one of just a few things. It's either that the credentials that you supplied when you installed the Velocity Management Console don't have administrator rights on that other EndNote server. So that's a credentials issue, or the correct ports aren't open on that EndNote machine, in which case it's fairly easy to solve. Just get the right ports open and deploy again. So in this case, it did all complete successfully. So let's go back to the dashboard here. So Velocity is now installed and running on both of these machines. We didn't have to reboot. If you want to double check that Velocity is installed, you can now open it directly on the machine from the Windows Start menu. So let's go ahead and do that on both. Here we go, Conducive Technologies Velocity. And I'll make one of these a bit bigger. There we go. So this is Velocity running on that Windows Server 2006 machine. You can see here we've got the dashboard data. It's all zeros because it hasn't had a chance to do anything yet. I've only just installed it. But if you see this screen when you open up Velocity on the EndNote server, it means it is installed. You would also have a service running. So let's bring up the list of services. And the service is simply called Velocity. And there it is. So I can see that the Velocity service is installed and it's in a running state. So in a few minutes, Velocity will start doing its thing. It will start eliminating storage I/O traffic from having to go out to the disk storage layer. It'll optimize what does have to still go out to the storage, and it will start using that RAM caching to satisfy a good percentage of the read I/O traffic from RAM at the speed of RAM rather than the speed of the media in the back-end disk storage layer. So for now, let's put that away. Just leave it down here. Now, back in the Velocity Management Console, what it's often useful to do is to have the Velocity dashboard data from the machines you've deployed Velocity to all show up in one aggregated report in the dashboard. And the way to do that is use this Select Systems button here. So we'll click on that, select the machines that you've deployed Velocity to, and you can select them all in one go if you hit that checkbox at the top, and then simply hit the Save Selection button, and you'll get a little warning saying updating the Velocity results section of the dashboard may take a while to complete. You can't run any other Velocity jobs whilst this job is running. Are you sure you want to continue? Now, even if you've got hundreds and hundreds of machines, it typically isn't going to take more than a minute or so to update. So go ahead and hit OK, and you'll see very quickly we start getting dashboard report data coming from these EndNote machines. Now, what I would suggest at this point is close Velocity. You can close it on the EndNode machines here. It'll stay running, of course, because it's running as a service. Use these machines as you normally would, or as your customer normally would. And in the Velocity Management Console, just simply close the browser window or leave it open, whichever you prefer, and use these EndNode machines as you normally would for a 2-week period. And the reason why I say 2 weeks is that Velocity contains a telemetry driver. And what that does is it learns about the workloads that are being run on each of the machines so that it can figure out things like what types of data need to be in the RAM cache and at what times of the day or the week. So it can be very intelligent about what data needs to be in there and when, and also how to size the storage I/O traffic that does have to go out to the disk storage layer to give whatever the main applications are that are running on these machines the very best performance. Now, of course, that telemetry needs a little bit of time to figure out what you're running on the machine and what type of data is being accessed. Usually, you'll start seeing results after a few minutes, but if you give it a 2-week period, then you know you've got enough data in there for a pretty reasonable proof of concept evaluation. When that 2 weeks is up, then you would gather the dashboard report data and typically send it to an engineer at Conducive to have it analyzed and get additional analysis. And I'll show you that in the next session.